This conference will now be recorded.
There we go.
Okay, I will, first we need the reading of the disclaimer, right? Stacy, please.
Yes. Adam, can you scroll to that? Thank you. Due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to novel coronavirus COVID-19 pursuant to Code Section 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body.
Thank you. And before I call this order, I'd like to recognize that there are 20-some people on here. I appreciate everybody who's joined in today. We'll have some more join us probably in the next few minutes or so. So appreciate that. Thank you. I'll call the meeting to order then. And Leah, will you please do the roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, CTAC members. I will be taking roll call. At this time, you may take a moment to unmute your mics. Should you encounter technical or volume issues, please type your name into the chat box for our records. Chair McLaughlin has called the meeting to order and his attendance has been noted. Please indicate your presence by saying here when your name is called. I'll go ahead and resume with the localities, beginning with the city of Fredericksburg. Mr. Joshua Brock.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. John Castellarin. I saw your name on the list, so you've been noted. And Mr. Matthew Rowe has notified us that he would not be able to make it. He has an excused absence. For Spotsylvania County, Vice Chair, Mr. Al Durante. I see you there. Mr. Neil Holleran. Mr. Stan Huey. Mr. Josh Templeton. Mr. Anton Stubbs.
Here.
Thank you. For Caroline County, Mr. Ken Pogue. Mr. Michael. Mr. Justin Chenault. For Stafford County, Mr. Melvin Allen Sr.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. David Swan.
Here.
Thank you. Miss Ethelian Crenshaw. Mr. Glenn Goldsmith.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Wade Sudreth.
Here.
Thank you. King George County, Dr. Robert Gates.
Here.
Thank you. And at-large members, Mr. Larry Gross.
Here.
Mr. Rupert Farley.
Here.
And Mr. Dustin Savage.
Here.
Thank you. Roll call has been taken. Please put your mics back on mute unless recognized by the chairman to speak. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so the screen here does not present all of the people. For example, Dave Swan, I don't see him showing up as one, so maybe he's a caller for caller number 4 or something. So
That's correct. I'm a caller.
Say again, Dave?
I said you are correct. I am a caller. I'm not on the screen.
Cool, excellent. All right, glad you're here. Okay, moving on to the approval of the agenda. I had one question about the agenda, which I clarified just before the meeting. The FAMPO informational video at number 6, Charlie 1, FAMPO informational video. We're not actually going to show the video, but we're going to talk about the video. So we'll keep it on the agenda. Are there any changes that need to be made by anybody regarding the agenda. This is an action item. I wouldn't expect any. We probably would have heard them already. So then I am going to ask if there's anybody who wants to abstain from voting on the approval of the CTAC agenda for tonight. I wouldn't expect there to be any of those. Is there anybody who disapproves?
Hold on, Dave.
Yep, go ahead.
I was not at that meeting. This is Dave Swan.
Okay, we're just talking about the agenda for tonight. Hold that thought for
Okay.
next. Yep.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the note. Thank you.
Not yet. Okay. Is there anybody who has any changes that they need to make or disapproves of the CTAC agenda for tonight? I wouldn't expect so. Hearing no changes, hearing no disapprovals. Any disapprovals? Okay. Then I'm going to assume, based on their fact that there are no disapprovals, that the agenda is approved as written and as published for tonight. Approved. Moving on to number 4, approval of the CTAC meeting minutes. Is there any discussion about things that need to be discussed on the meeting minutes themselves?
Move approval of the minutes.
Okay, Rupert made a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I second.
Who is that, please?
It's Melvin.
Thanks, Melvin. Okay, so we have approval, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, is there anyone who would like to abstain like Dave Swan because he was not present at the last meeting for approving the meeting minutes because he was not present? Anybody else?
Yes. This is Rob Gates. I'd like to abstain.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody else? Okay, is there anybody who wants to disapprove of the minutes as published and as presented to us at this time? Anybody who disagrees with the minutes? Okay, nobody. If there's no one who disapproves of the meeting minutes, then I will infer that everyone else who has not abstained, it does agree with the minutes as published and as written. Thank you. Okay, what do we got? Public comment, please, Stacy.
Yeah, we have one public comment to read, and then I would ask the chair to see if anyone's on the line who wishes to speak. Adam, could you bring up the survey screenshot for the public while I read this? I think it's your other tab. There you go. So as I'm reading it, this is just the survey for members of the public. If you want to take this after the meeting or now, you can click on or go to the link. I don't think the link will work if you click on it, or you can scan it with your phone and take a short survey. Let us know who you are and how we did tonight. So the comment we received is from Elizabeth Ledoux. She is a resident of Fredericksburg. Elizabeth writes, I saw a Facebook post asking for thoughts on biking and walking trails in Fredericksburg. The federal Safe Routes to Schools program has federal money for building walking and biking trails to schools. I propose we use funds like these to build a bike trail that runs from Learning Lane, running north along Route 1, all the way to James Monroe High School, connecting all of our schools to the same new path, and connecting to the VCR trail and the canal path, giving a huge percentage of our school-age children access to a path route to every school in our district. Also, the large number of people walking along Route 1 would have a safe path to get to their destinations, which I am guessing is to shopping. Next, we can address a safe path along Lafayette Boulevard for the same purpose. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, Stacy, I have a question. Was that comment also provided to the tax, or was it after their meeting?
Yes, it was. We received this comment on December 14th.
Okay, good, thank you. And obviously we go to the BPAC as well, so,
Yes.
all right.
We may have
Okay.
members of the public online, Mr. Chair, who wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to welcome any members of the public to speak at this time.
Hello, my name is Maureen Howell.
Hello, Maureen.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I wish everybody a good evening, and I must present that I'm not sure if this is the proper forum for my comment, but I'm having some trouble with a road that I'd like to get taken into the secondary state highway system, and I thought maybe I would try bringing it before this committee, and if it's not the proper forum to address this, if someone could give me some direction or guidance, I like to let everybody know that I did write up a public presentation and try to submit it to my Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors meeting that was held last night, but I've not been made aware whether or not it was actually heard. I'm a resident of Spotsylvania County. I've lived at the same address for 40 years, and I live in the Chancellor District. Would it be not appropriate for me to just, in the interest of time, since I only have a few minutes to speak, to just go ahead and read the presentation that I submitted, which is less than 800 characters?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much. My address is 14920 North Rapidan Road, Fredericksburg, Virginia, 22407. I have lived at this address for 40 years thus far, since August 6, 1980. I am respectfully requesting consideration and support from the honorable members of the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors to accept the remaining 0.45-mile portion of North Rapidan Road as a rural addition, or howsoever it may qualify, and to bring it into the secondary system of state highways. This portion of the road is the other half of the state-maintained part of Route 753 and now serves 7 families/houses. My disabled son often requires emergency medical attention. I am greatly concerned the severe erosion/rapid deterioration of this road will prohibit the rescue squad's access to our home when my son is in need of their help. And that's where I stopped my presentation. And like I said, I don't know whether or not it was heard last night.
Stacy, could you ensure that that gets to, I mean, that's not a so much a CTAC issue that we would address, but more of a local, as you did, you tried to discuss with Spotsylvania County itself, specifically Supervisor. But Stacy, or that's,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, go ahead.
this is Al Durante, and I am on the Spotsylvania Transportation Committee.
Perfect.
I would like to inform and invite the caller to call in or to attend the meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It is an online, we are meeting both in person and online. I would recommend online using WebEx, but you could also call the transportation. You can call Paul Agnello, who's the Assistant Director of Transportation for the county, and maybe get some more information or some help from him. His phone number is 540-507-6700. 7238.
7238. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Eldorante. I
I'm
need
sorry,
to inform you.
I'm sorry, I misread that. 7398.
7398.
And there's an email also. If you go to the Spotsylvania website, under the Transportation Committee, you'll be able to find that information.
I actually screenshotted my form that I submitted through the Spotsylvania County website to get my presentation in front of the board and emailed that to him. I need to let everybody know that I don't have reliable access to the internet here. I usually get kicked off the internet unless I stay up till about 2 or 3 a.m. to be able to submit anything. And I've been speaking with Mr. Aniello, and I was told that my best way of getting attention to this issue was to submit it to my board of supervisors, which I made an attempt to do. Like I said, though, it's a one-way communication, and I have no way of knowing whether or not my presentation was heard by the board last night because I couldn't be there and I couldn't access the meeting while it was happening live.
Well, your
So like I said,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
beg your pardon. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Your supervisor, Dave McLaughlin, is usually at the meetings and usually very vocal. So you might want to either reach out to him separately or attend the meeting tomorrow and discuss your situation in front of the entire transportation board.
Okay, sir, I'm a little bit confused because I thought the Chancellor District Supervisor for Spotsylvania County was Tim McLaughlin.
I'm sorry, Tim McLaughlin, you're right. Sorry, Dave. No relation. I'm sorry, Tim McLaughlin, you are correct.
Okay, when I was listening to the roll call, I thought they said Tim McLaughlin was there tonight.
No, that's our chair, Dave McLaughlin. See, that's my confusion. No relation, Hope. I mean, no relation.
Same spelling and everything, but no.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And
I was going to say
so
that is you to talk directly to your specific representative on the supervisors. So that's excellent.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I've been working on that since August of 2020. So 5 months I've been back and forth between Spotsylvania County Planning and Transportation Commission, the Erosion and Stormwater Department, and the VDOT. And I just seem to be hitting a brick wall. So I'm knocking on every door I can knock on as far as the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. I guess my next step would be the Spotsylvania Transportation Committee. And after that, I'm kind of out of options because I don't know where else to go. So I'm just throwing it out there. And like I said, I appreciate the guidance and the direction. And I will follow through as advised. Thank you so much, Mr. Eldorante, and everybody at CTAC. And if it's okay, if I could just continue to listen by way of muting everything on my end, and this will be my first Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee meeting, and I'd kind of like to kick back and listen and see what goes on, what happens there, and try to get an idea of the issues that are placed before you. So if I need anything in the future, I'll know where to go.
Dave, this is Ian Ollis from FAMPO. Could we just ask whoever's closest to the lady that's called in and was speaking, if you could just send all that information to me any way that you can get it to me, I will follow up with Spotsylvania and make it just a personal correspondence thing to deal with, to try and just help out and expedite this matter, at least to get the lady an answer. It's not part of my responsibility, but I just offered to help out, just expedite this so that she doesn't have this thing going on and on without an answer.
That's magnificent. Ma'am, your perseverance is paying off. You've just heard from the head administrator of our organization. So please provide your information to him, or Stacy maybe can reach out to you and get your contact information.
Yes, sir.
And also, if you can send your information, including your what you submitted to the board yesterday, to me. My email should be on the Spotsy website, or you can reach out again to Stacy, and she'd be able to get it to you. And I'll make sure to mention it tomorrow, bring it up at the meeting tomorrow if you are not going to be there.
Could you tell me your name again, sir?
It's Al Durante.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address CTAC? Is there anyone else who would like to address CTAC? Okay, hearing none, we will close this session, and Stacy, you will announce about the later session.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will have time for another session of public comments after we finish the member discussion and action items that are about to begin at your direction.
Thank you. Okay, the first item 6A is a guest speaker from VRE, the manager of project development, Christine Hefner, maybe, perhaps I missed it. Welcome.
Thank you. And it is Hefner. Thank you. And good evening to everybody. I'm VRE's manager of project development, which really means that I oversee all long and short range planning for the VRE system, including service planning, as well as planning for expansion of station facilities and other facilities. So I'm pleased to be here tonight. And I will be going over a brief overview of VRE in case some of the folks here tonight are not that familiar with VRE, as well as reviewing some of the station improvement projects that we have within the FAMPO area that you'll be seeing some construction starting, probably starting this year and extending over the next number of years as we expand our system. So next slide, please. VRE is a joint project of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission and the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commissions. We also have our own operations board that's been delegated many functions by the commissions to manage VRE and conduct business, the business of VRE, and then there are still some actions that related to VRE that are considered by the commissions as well. Next slide. VRE's been around almost 30 years. The service began in 1992. We have two lines, the Fredericksburg line, which many of you may be most familiar with, which runs parallel to the I-95 highway corridor, and also the Manassas line, which extends roughly parallel to the I-66 in the Northern Virginia area to the Manassas area. Next slide, please. VRE is known for a number of things, safe and healthy operations, safety of our passengers and safety of our crew and operations is the highest priority for us. We're also known for very high customer satisfaction through our annual customer surveys, typically get very high marks, as well as the quality of the service, the reliability of the service, and strong partnerships with a number of partners, whether it's our member jurisdictions, local and regional planning organizations such as FAMPO, our host railroads. We work very closely with both CSX on the Fredericksburg line and Norfolk Southern on the Manassas line, as well as some of our funding partners, including the state and the newly formed Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. Next slide. In the forefront of everybody's mind for almost the last year is COVID-19, and VRE has been responding to ensure the safety and the health of our passengers. We've continued operations throughout the last year. We did start reduced service, a reduction of about 50% in our service levels in March of 2020 in response to the stay-at-home orders and the great reduction in the number of passengers that we were carrying. And at the same time, we started a number of measures to ensure the safety of our riders, enhanced cleaning both within the trains themselves and at our stations. Next slide. As well as implementing measures to ensure the social distancing at our stations and on board our trains, including marking spots where people can stand to maintain the proper distance on the platforms, limiting where people can sit on the trains to ensure social distancing, and then providing information on our website on all of these measures, as well as information on which trains are have the most seats available if there's a concern about the number of people on the train. And as more people come back to riding VRE, to understand which trains have seating available at the reduced seating capacity that we're operating as a COVID-19 measure, a safety measure. You can find all of this information and more on the VRE website, and the web link is at the bottom of this slide. Next slide. VRE serves a large population beyond our member jurisdictions, which are shown outlined in orange, the 9 member jurisdictions that constitute the VRE service area. Here, we extend both down to Richmond and then out as far west as Charlottesville, and even some folks coming from the Newport News area. So a pretty broad Northern Virginia and even the Central Virginia region that were carrying people. Next slide.
Ms. Hefner?
Yes.
That slide really caught my eye when I saw it earlier, that the influence of VRE over such a large part of Virginia is pretty significant. Now, I know the numbers in maybe Charlottesville and the Hampton Roads are not large, but still, I don't think that's an attribute of the system, and that's been well advertised and understood by many, how influential or how many lives you do impact, even beyond the people who just live real close to the station. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, that's a very good observation, and yeah, I don't think it's as widely known, locally or within, the Northern Virginia FAMPO regions, how far our reach is in being a transportation solution. So this map really helps to make that point to folks.
This is Karen with VRE, and I would just say, to add to Christine's comments, our 2019 Master Agreement Survey and our customer survey, we, of course, serve directly 9 jurisdictions, but there are 45 jurisdictions from which our riders hail, but only 9 jurisdictions contribute to the financial operations of VRE.
Yeah, so we're providing a service well beyond and a benefit to the traveling public well beyond the VRE service area and the contributions of our member jurisdictions. So thank you. A few more statistics about VRE. This shows all of our stations. On the Fredericksburg line shown in red here, there are 9 stations currently from Franconia Springfield South to Spotsylvania County. There's a future station, the Potomac Shores Station in Prince William County, that is in design right now and will be going to construction probably within the next year or two, and be expanding the VRE system through that additional station. There's also 4 shared stations that are also served by the Manassas line in Alexandria, Crystal City, LaFont, and Union Station in Washington, D.C. We have a relatively small staff given the service of 50 actual VRE employees, but then we have a number of contract employees that both operate the trains and maintain the trains, as well as do the maintenance and upkeep of our station. Next slide. From a funding standpoint, we have a fairly large operating budget. In fiscal year 21, the total operating and capital budget was $162 million. Of that, about $90 million was for operations, and the rest for capital. And our operations are split amongst, or our funds are split amongst a number of different areas. But by large, on the capital side, is a large portion of our budget, almost half the budget. And then on the operating side, the train operations and maintenance is a large portion. The other piece that you'll see, access fees and host railroad costs, is another large cost portion of our operating budget. And those are fees that we pay to the host railroads. VRE does not own the tracks over which it operates. We essentially lease the tracks from the host railroads, and several of the stations and the station facilities are actually located in most stations within the railroad right-of-way. So we pay a lease for those to the host railroads. The parking at the stations is typically owned by the local jurisdiction where the station is located, or VRE, so that's not something that we're paying a lease on. On the source of funds, fair revenue under our master agreement is required to cover 50% of the expenses. Because of the COVID this past year, we did not meet that. That's the first time that VRE hasn't met that requirement. But as ridership continues to grow, we expand our service and operate the service with that goal in mind. We also receive a large portion of federal money, primarily for capital and state operating assistance. And then there's the jurisdictional subsidy, which is also a large portion of the source of funds that we have to be able to operate the service and expand the system. Next slide. Just talking a little bit more about the jurisdictional subsidy. It's split between the 9 member jurisdictions, and this just shows the ranking of the various jurisdictions and their amount they pay, which is proportional to the number of riders that they have where they live. So we have a lot of riders from Fairfax and Prince William County, but Stafford and Spotsylvania County are also large contributors to the VRE ridership. Next slide. Switching gears, talking a little bit about future expansion of the VRE system and rail in Virginia. Many of you may be familiar with the Commonwealth of Virginia's Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. That was announced about a year ago by the governor. And what that will do is the state will acquire half of the existing CSX right-of-way from Washington, D.C. down actually to the North Carolina border with the state, but within the VRE service area, they'll be acquiring half of the right-of-way that will enable them to build 2 tracks in the long term that would support passenger rail. Right now, they're working to build what's been known for quite a while as a third track down to Spotsylvania, but ultimately there'll be 2 tracks dedicated to passenger rail in this corridor, and then 2 tracks for freight rail. And VRE, being one of the large users of this corridor, will see a lot of benefits from the state's initiative in expanding the rail capacity, both with service reliability and also allowing for us to expand our service with longer trains. And what most people are very interested in is more frequent trains. Next slide. One of the major elements of this transforming rail in Virginia is the second rail crossing over the Potomac River, often referred to as the Long Bridge. That is the major bottleneck on the East Coast, and the major capacity constraint that's been preventing VRE service expansion. So this has been identified as part of the state's program, and they've identified funding, and will estimate that the bridge construction will be complete by 2030. So we'll be seeing those improvements coming in the next decade. Next slide. In addition to purchasing the track and building the rail infrastructure, the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative also has some commitments for expanded VRE service. Overall, it will allow for an additional 9 daily round trips. Currently, VRE's full schedule is 16 round trips, so an additional 9 round trips, and 5 of them, those round trips will be on the Fredericksburg line, with a round trip being a trip into Washington, D.C. in the morning and then a return trip in the afternoon. So that's a large increase in our service capabilities that will allow us to have more frequent service, as well as extending our operating window to later nights, earlier in the afternoon, later in the morning, as well as it allows for the introduction of weekend service. Next slide. At the VRE station level, we have a number of improvements underway that have been designed and coordinated with the state to expand the capacity of our stations to allow for the service expansion that the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative will enable. And a number of them are in the Fampo area. The Fredericksburg station will be going to construction later on this year. It'll include a number of improvements at the station, both repairing some of the bridges that cross the underlying roadways at the station, as well as extending the platform and adding additional pedestrian access to the platform. There'll be actually a new access stair right near the Fampo building to be able to get up onto the platform, the longer platform that will be built as part of this project. Next slide. Improvements planned for Leland Road will extend the platform, a longer platform, to allow it to handle longer trains. Right now at Leland Road, as well as the Brook Station, the platforms is fairly short. It's the length that was originally built back in 1992, when we only operated a couple cars per train. Now our trains can be up to 8 cars long, and so right now they cannot open all of the doors on the train to let people get off. It creates a delay in boarding and letting people get off because of that. So the projects at Leland Road and also at Brook will extend the platform to allow for those longer trains in the near term, but also will be designed so that as a future third track is constructed by the state, there'll be 2-sided platforms. So you would be able to have a train stop on either side of the platform, and that really is a big benefit longer term when we're operating bi-directional service. If you have trains in both directions, that we'd be able to service stations simultaneously with a train going in either direction. And next slide. And similar improvements are planned for Brook. Those won't be started until 2028 is the current scheduled start date. Leland Road, you'll see improvements a little bit earlier in 2025. So this will be a phased expansion of all of the stations on the Fredericksburg line. That'll be done as the state also is planning for the extension of the track. Next slide. Franconia Springfield is not in the Fampo area, but that's another project that if you're a VRE rider, you'll see construction going on again later on this year, extending the platform, lengthening the platform, and making modifications to enable it to serve trains from both sides as the state constructs the third track and ultimately a fourth track so that you would have 2 passenger tracks within the corridor. Next slide. And Crystal City, also not a within the Fampo area, but another project that'll be under construction in the coming years. This is actually a reconstruction of the Crystal City station, moving it closer to the location where it would provide easier access to a proposed new metro station entrance, and also, again, allowing for a platform that could serve trains on 2 sides, making it much more accessible for the trains as well in this new location. Next slide. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be glad to take questions now, or I don't know if you want to hold them till later, but thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you, madam. I was listening not long ago. Congressman Whitman was talking about something that dealing with the VR that's coming across the Rappahannock. Is this part of his thought process, or is this something different?
Could you repeat the question? You kind of cut out a little bit. I didn't get the whole question.
Congressman Whitman, maybe about last year, he was talking about bringing something across the Rappahannock so that the VRE could attach to get northbound from down south near the Hampton Roads area. Is this part of that project, or is that something different?
I'm not really sure. Currently, we do, we do cross the Rappahannock on the existing railroad bridge. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm not sure what he was referring to. He may have been referring to what's been called a third track, which would involve building an additional bridge across the Rappahannock River.
That's what it was, the third track.
Okay, yes. As the state expands rail capacity and constructs additional track, there's a number of railroad crossings, but the Rappahannock is one of the major crossings where you cannot fit another track on the existing railroad bridge. So that would require building an additional bridge. And that is part of the state's Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative to extend that third track all the way down to Spotsylvania and ultimately farther south to support the state-sponsored Amtrak service. So that is something that's in the program. It's something that currently is planned for, I believe, post 2030. The improvements that will be going on between now and 2030 are primarily in the northern portion of the corridor, including the Long Bridge. Where it is the largest capacity constraint, because not only do you have Fredericksburg line and CSX trains, you also have VRE trains that merge into the CSX corridor at Alexandria from the Manassas line. So that is the approach right now, is to address the areas of the greatest constraint first.
So will it be completed 2030, or will start 2030, or somewhere in between there?
By 2030, there will be the Long Bridge is expected to be completed, as well as additional track to the Lorton area of Fairfax County. Then post 2030, the state's current plan is to continue to extend track southbound as funding becomes available. And I don't have information on the specific timing of that, whether it'll sort of sequentially continue southbound or if they'll skip around. That would be a question for the state.
That's okay. Thank you for your information, though. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair, this is Ian Ollis from FAMPO. I must say that it sounds very exciting. I'm very excited about the possibilities of improving rail through our region, and building the third track, upgrading our stations. I'm glad that we're already getting to build in Fredericksburg this year. When I first arrived in the FAMPO region, I thought that it's going to be quite some time before we start on this, but I'm glad to hear that we're starting construction in Fredericksburg in 2021. And that'll be a great upgrade of our station, which I think is great. And obviously the others are coming in the years to come. My only comment, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, is it's just such a pity it takes 10 years to build a bridge out of DC, because of course that's the one big limitation on the rest of the expansion, is that we can't get enough trains out of DC. But I look forward to that, and if there's anything we can do to speed up the process, let us know. We're very keen to see this happen.
Yeah, VRE is too. This is something that we've been planning and talking about for a long time. I will say I found out in a meeting today with staff from Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation that they have awarded a contract for design of the bridge. So they are moving forward. So, and I believe it's a 2-year schedule to complete design. So there may be an opportunity with if they can keep to that schedule to advance the construction of the bridge earlier.
Fantastic. If I can call somebody to encourage that, tell me, I'll call them.
Well, you can let DRPT know, as well as the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. They have monthly meetings, and I'm sure they'd be happy to hear about people that are supporting their efforts.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
This is Larry. You got time for one more question?
I do, Larry.
I thought the presentation was great, and I appreciate it. I was going to ask if the VRE folks have talked any about the pandemic and what might happen after, in terms of whether people are going to change their habits or not.
Well, I'll give my answer, and I'll let Karen also weigh in on that. I mean, I will say that we've been seeing ridership increasing in the last few months from the levels that it was, say, in March and April, which is very encouraging. So that's something that certainly from an overall planning perspective, we're optimistic that people will continue to want to ride VRE and will also continue to take whatever measures, current measures, and continue to explore other measures to make sure that people feel safe and when they're riding VRE.
Ms. Hoffner, I'm getting questions from folks, and then we used to be already mostly out of Quantico, and they're saying that if sometimes they'll get on the train and folks are not having a mask on. What does a passenger rights that's wearing a mask? What can he or she do when someone is not wearing a mask? Do they report it to somebody, or do they have to suffer the consequence with nobody with their mask on?
So this is Karen, and I will share with you what we have advised passengers to do, because we are totally committed to 100% mask wearing, not just when you get on the train, but through your entire ride.
Right.
if you encounter someone who has not been wearing a mask, it should be reported to the conductor immediately. And that conductor will share that with us. If they want to go on, we have had folks do other things, share pictures with us, do whatever. But we need to be apprised immediately of anyone who is not in compliance, because we are committed, we are totally committed to the health and safety of our passengers. So we need to know that. And if it can be addressed almost instantly on the train, then we need to do that. As I say, I think that anyone who can share with us that information, we can just go on and make an even better passenger experience. But we need the help of all our passengers, and we have been out there on social media, on our website, on numerous ways to not convince, but to convey to our passengers and build buy-in that they are critical to making sure that our rail is safe and healthy. We can't do it without them.
Thank you.
And that said, we do have customer service agents available throughout the entire commuting day. They can call in, they can share via social media, they can email us. There are many mechanisms for them to be able to do that, and we encourage them to get that information to us and to share it with us. We go out.
Can I get your call-in number?
I will look it up right now. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I will give it to you. I will tell you, Go Trains.
Go Train.
Go Trains. I'm going to just post in a moment both our email and our call-in number. So just give me a moment and I will.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay, so you'll put that on our chat for us.
I will
We'll have it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Ms. Hafner and Ms. Clarkson, thank you very much. Since Stacy came aboard, she has done a great job of trying to help the members of this committee become more educated, more well aware of the issues that all the moving parts that are involved with transportation are in our region. We just got to know all about everything that's going on. It's a lot to read our event. So she's done a good job of arranging for folks like you to come and speak to us and tell us what the issues are, tell us what's going on. And we appreciate that very much. And thank you. It was very informative. And thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Stacy. She did an amazing job. We actually had planned this conversation for April of 2020, and of course the pandemic hit and we were not able to follow up, but she has been in contact with us religiously, and we're so glad to have had the opportunity to present.
Thank you. All right, next item is the COVID commuter survey results, round 2, Stacy.
Okay, so let me switch. I've got two different VDOT presentations to touch on. Commuter survey results. Okay, so VDOT is in the process of conducting a series of commuter surveys to learn how commuter behavior has changed in light of COVID-19. They conducted one in the summer, and now they've finished their fall, and they're planning on a third one, I believe. So they do have a dashboard on their website where you can go and view. That's what you can see on your screen now. You can view the survey results for round 1 and round 2 of the surveys. So in your own time, check that out. They have very great infographics. And then also, Adam, if you can scroll down a little bit more, if you want to kind of break down, the dashboard, Adam, thanks. If you want to break down the data by just the Fredericksburg region, you can do that by going to the home district on the left Adam will show you that here on your screen. And so then you can look at the information on commuter behavior changes just in Fredericksburg, but it's also very interesting to look at it statewide. I won't take up too much of your time on this, but I will say that FAMPO staff has looked at this, and there's really great information and a lot of stuff you can take away from it. We did have some questions, and we recently sat down with a few people from VDOT. So if you have any questions while you're reviewing this, feel free to reach out to either Ian or I, and I think Jordan also was on the call there. So just reach out to FAMPO staff and say, hey, I have some questions, because likely those are the same questions that we've asked to VDOT last week ourselves. And so this link is in your agenda tonight. Otherwise, for the folks tuning in from the public, if you just go to, I believe it's vdot.org, and you just do their search bar, commuter survey, round 1 or round 2, and it'll come up there for you. Yeah, oh, actually, virginiadot.org.
Okay, well, you have the floor.
Okay, next is, okay, there was a public hearing last week. It was a VDOT public hearing on improvements to Route 3. It was virtual, attendance was sparse because, as you know, our country had, a lot of excitement, I will say, going on the same day, the same time. So a lot of people were glued to their TVs and radios and didn't have time to attend. So I'll just summarize for you real quick what I heard from the public, their concerns on these improvements to Route 3, which are basically changing right turn lanes in the main shopping areas, 3 different ones, into through lanes as well as turn lanes. And the goal is to provide more capacity for vehicles and to move traffic faster. VDOT said that they anticipate these 3 lane changes will result in traffic flowing about a minute faster. They are still taking public comment, and you need to get your public comments in by, I believe it's the 16th, should be the 16th, I wrote down the 6th. The 16th of January. And so we have a link in the agenda packet for you that takes you to a website where you can see, as you're seeing now on your screen, all the different improvements that they're planning on doing. They believe they're going to start this work in 2024 and finish it that year. And just roughly the different areas are at the entrance of the Spotsylvania Town Center, so the mall area. Also, there is going to be one near the BJ's, that's another area. And then the third area where they're going to do the turn lanes is the Salem Church intersection with Route 3. And we do have an informational video where I do my best to walk you through these changes. And that there's a link also in your agenda packet to that. We also have it on the FAMPO website under transportation news. Yeah, Adam's bringing up the video. So you can just kind of follow along, and I do my best to point out what I've learned. There were just a few concerns raised from the public during the public hearing. One, someone was concerned about safety. Of course, you have one lane and traffic is going to come out of that one lane in 2 different directions. VDOT said that they looked at crash data and they don't believe there's any issue with regards to safety. The public also expressed their frustration. They believe that it's the traffic timing, the timing of the signals that needs the improvement, not lane changes. And finally, the public also expressed frustration that Central Park entrance, so the shopping area to Central Park, that entrance is not included in the scope of this project. And they would have liked to seen that improved there as well.
Thanks, Stacy. I think there was one of the improvements was eastbound as well. So I think there's 3 westbound and 1 eastbound where they're removing the bump outs. So especially, I'd commend the video to. It's not very long, and in fact, the first several minutes of it are telling the public how how easy they're making it for them to provide input back to VDOT on this particular project. Pretty impressive. But then just going through the bump outs and you grasp it pretty quickly. But for those, especially from representing Spotsylvania, I think you'd find it interesting because you might get questions about that you can answer on what it is. So thank you for that, Stacy.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We just did an improvement with the Route 3 going into the mall there, and I'm trying to figure out now. You got 2 lanes going in there from the right hand side. Then you still got another one that could turn right to go in there. I'm trying to figure out what kind of improvement could we do, because you got that eastbound traffic that's coming. It come pretty steady. So what kind of how will we make it easy? Because we do have those 2 lanes coming up when you go southbound. You got the 2 lanes, so you get off the interstate, you can stay in those 2 lanes, and you go right into the mall. Then you have another one that sits there too. If you miss it, you could take you right into the mall. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of improvement would it be to improve what's already there, and the kind of money that we would spend to try to improve something that's have been improved.
Yeah, and that might be something I would encourage you to go to the VDOT site. There's a link there at 6C on the agenda, and they have a recording of the public hearing where they actually run through, how the changes will impact the traffic flow. And then I would say after you watch that, then submit your comments to VDOT on that. Their main goal.
You should go to VDOT what?
There's a link. So can you see your screen right now under 6? Hold on. Oops.
Under number 6.
Yeah, under 6. What is it? C. It's underlined in blue. Well,
okay.
It's blue lettering. You click on that. It'll take you to the page you're looking at now. And under public outreach, there's a video of the actual public hearing. It's not very long.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But I will tell you, Melvin, that does not really address the intersection that you're discussing. So in this particular Route 3 operational improvements, so you might have to go a little beyond that. Next, we have the pleasure of Mr. Hollis telling us about the future of passenger rail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am doing 2 presentations tonight. The first one, I am not going to be using any slides at all. I'm just going to talk you through it, but I am putting a link in the chat column if people want to go there after and do some further research. What I'm presenting is really just some proposals from the Greater Washington Partnership for the future of passenger rail in our area. They've called their proposals Rail Vision, the Capital Rail Vision, there you have it. And they're looking at a number of additional proposals which could further improve our train experience between our region and Washington, D.C. Now, you've heard a really excellent presentation by our Christine and colleagues from VRE tonight about the physical infrastructure improvements that are already agreed, already budgeted for, and already starting construction very soon. The Washington Partnership gave us as staff a presentation and have asked myself to serve on their technical advisory committee. So I don't represent the Greater Washington Partnership, I represent FAMPO, but there are a couple of the points that they've made which I think we should be aware of, and I'm just going to share those tonight. The first one is that they are hoping to promote the idea of bidirectional run-through service, as they call it, to connect Maryland, the District of Columbia, DC capital, and Virginia. And they propose to do this by connecting the service of the MARC trains, the Maryland commuter rail service, with the VRE service that we have here in Virginia. And those trains, the proposal is to run them right through Washington, D.C. and continue out the other end. This would mean, Mr. Chairman, that MARC trains would come all the way south through D.C. and continue into Virginia and would be offloading passengers at, say, the Fredericksburg train station or the Spotsylvania train station. And likewise, the VRE trains would go all the way through DC and not terminate and stop at the Union Station, but would continue through all the way to, say, Baltimore. And in that way, you could increase the service and increase the number of trains and also provide a one-seat ride. If you got on a train in Baltimore, you could get off at the train in Fredericksburg without changing trains, without moving to another coach. And likewise, in the other direction, you could get on a VRE train in Fredericksburg or Spotsylvania or Stafford and ride all the way through to Baltimore. And that is their first proposal. They're then looking at proposing an all-day service by, secondly, increasing the level of service, and are hoping to aim in the future at 15-minute peak period service during the weekday. And also a frequent service on the weekend. They also propose that in order to achieve this, we need improved operational coordination between VRE and the Maryland commuter rail system, together with the station in Baltimore. And finally, they are suggesting that we integrate the fare policy, so the cost of the ticket, as well as the branding. Now, I'm not sure whether we will ever be able to integrate the branding, but I'm sure that we could look at integrating the fare policy as well. These are the 4 key proposals that the Greater Washington Partnership are proposing for the Virginia and Maryland and DC commuter rail systems, that creates an integrated system rather than separate train systems that all stop in DC, and DC then just becomes the end point. So this is something that they're proposing in addition to what you've already heard tonight from the VRE folks of what is being upgraded on the infrastructure side. The Greater Washington Partnership is proposing that we try to connect VRE, MARC, and all the commuter rail trains that go into DC, and that we don't stop them at DC. We integrate the service. We try to integrate the ticket pricing so that one ticket will take you the whole way. And this is an interesting proposal, and I think we should think about it. They obviously would like us to support them in these kinds of proposals, but it's something that's ongoing, and they put it on the table in December. They launched their Rail Vision project in December to get discussion going between all the role players. And it's something significant that I think we should be aware of as FAMPO.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So this is Dustin. Does this go over the issue of the MARC being overhead electric and then having to swap in DC to diesel engines going south? Is there a way to make that transition smooth? Or are they just going to swap engines? You just stay in the seat like you do right now if you take Amtrak?
So the operational questions haven't been finalized in terms of the proposal. They are looking at the possibility that we might need to buy additional equipment, additional rolling stock. So it might be a requirement that we buy new trains. The question of whether or not to extend the electrical lines, the power lines, the overhead catenary, or an alternative system has not been clearly spelled out. So that's something that we need to follow up on. And it's certainly a question that I'm going to be asking more detail from them when I attend their technical advisory committees in the future. So I can't answer your question as I sit here right now. Safe to say that I'm going to ask exactly that kind of question at the technical advisory committee. How exactly are they going to make it a one-seat ride? Is it only the diesel components that are available in Maryland that are going to be able to come through, or are they expecting some sort of electrification system, or are they going to run diesel in Maryland? I can't answer the question right now, but it's certainly something that we should follow up on.
Thank you. I'm actually very interested in this. I actually like this idea a lot. Is there a follow-up where I can get information to see these meetings or listen in on them as well?
So if you go to the link that I put on the website, you can connect to the Washington Partnerships website. And if you go through the website itself, they provide further information on it there. So if you just, Adam has pulled up the front page, as you can see now on your screen. But if you go to that website yourself, you can follow, all the different who's on the team, how the thing operates, who leads the process, and so on. You can also contact them.
Fantastic. Thank you.
The link is on the chat page or the chat over there. Dustin.
Oh,
That's good.
thank you. Yeah, I see it. I had the chat window hidden. Thank you. I got it.
Right.
Great. Excellent.
So this is Karen from VRE, and I would just add, there are many technical hurdles to overcome, and there are many issues that are involved, from infrastructure to scheduling to how we pull through this. And we are VRE is very much interested in and integrating in this process, and we've been involved. I would say that, there clearly is a real interest in Maryland, of course, because of National Landing, to be able to pull MARC trains into our stations. There may not be as much of an interest, or quite frankly, from when you look at it from a customer standpoint, from us going beyond Union Station into Maryland. But this is all something to be worked out. But in terms of Virginia's economic growth, and in particularly in Northern Virginia, yes, it's something we clearly want to look at. But the Long Bridge is the second crossing over the Potomac. We call it the Long Bridge, but there aren't these Long Bridge. The second crossing over the Potomac is the critical key to allowing anything to happen. Without that, there's no way we are going to be able to have, our trains going up into Maryland and MARC trains coming into us. So I would just put that forward and clearly ask each of you to, consider advocating for, as we move forward, that second crossing over the Potomac and supporting it.
I absolutely agree with what's just been said. We, as FAMPO, I would encourage all of us to support the completion of that Long Bridge, the second Long Bridge, to move from 2 tracks across the river to 4 tracks. It's absolutely essential. Whichever vision of the future is realized, that is the greatest sticking point at the moment, and I think we should support it. And I would encourage, Mr. Chairman, that this committee supports that as well, that we encourage them to do it. We encourage them to do it as fast as possible, that they make the funding available. I'm encouraged, however, the House of Representatives in Congress voted already in, I think it was December, to allocate land, federal land, which is needed to build this second bridge as part of the Long Bridge project, and it's been sent to the Senate for agreement and ratification. So Congress is moving on this issue, and I'm hopeful that we've heard tonight there's a contract out for consultants to design the bridge. Congress seems supportive of it, and I think we should support it in the sense of encouraging them to do it and to do it as soon as possible.
Another question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So, in regards to that bridge, and I've, from the presentation and reading it, so it's saying the bridge is 1.9 billion. Is that included as any part of the other $3.7 billion deal with CSX to buy the existing rail? Will any of that money be used to be allocated? Or I mean, the state's going to fund that for that purchase. Are they going to allocate any of that to try and do this as like startup, like startup capital, if you will, for this project, or is this going to have to be completely new sources of funding altogether? If I missed that in the presentation, I apologize.
I think we should ask our VRE colleagues to answer that question in that they've been involved in the funding from Virginia that is being allocated to the rail project.
So I cannot speak with authority, but I can tell you my understanding from what our interactions have been with the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. It is a 1.9 billion. It's a massive project, which is being primarily funded by the Commonwealth. That said, VRE, which receives money from the Commonwealth through what we call the CROC, has decided to devote for after the 2022 fiscal year, because that money, the CROC money, has already been apportioned and allocated to supporting the Long Bridge project. The Commonwealth seems to have sufficient funds to advance the project. We will support it because honestly, without that bridge, we will never be able to expand and to grow. And there may be other funds forthcoming from the federal government and perhaps even from the District of Columbia, but there's nothing certain about that. But I do believe funding is in place, or at least a plan for the funding is in place, definitely in the short term, I believe in the long term, and we are all committed to it. And, our freight rail partners, CSX in particular, which the current Long Bridge, it wants nothing else than to have this because it will improve freight rail service throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the Northeast region. Because if it doesn't have to deal with passenger rail service, commuter rail service, it is free to go on its own separate Long Bridge over the Potomac. And it
This is the chair. I'm going to wrap the gavel here. We're getting kind of far afield in details and future fundings and things that we do not have any control over. We want to know about them, but we don't have any control over. So I think some of this needs to be taken offline, some of this detailed discussion and further on discussion. The whole issue of what's going on, it sounds very exciting, and there was nobody or none of us who would not support what we're talking about, but I think we're getting a little afield here. So I'm gonna ask that we move on now to the 2050 long range transportation plan, please. Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am up again. The long-range transportation plan update for 2050, I think you're all aware of, and it's been discussed before. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to belabor the point. I'll just quickly go through these slides just so get you a flavor for where we are. So the LRTP 2045 goals and objectives were adopted relatively recently in 2018. And they're largely updates from the 2040 plan, not very substantial overhauls. The staff developed a survey in October based on committee feedback. This was released on the 6th of November, and the survey closed at the end of December. That's something that Stacey is working on, and she'll give you feedback at a later date. Based on committee feedback and survey responses, the staff will make recommendations to the policy committee in February for potential updates to the goals and objectives if we believe any particular ones need to change. Next slide. The project lists were amended in July 2020 to account for Smart Scale Round 3 and the 2024 TIP and local project updates. That's quite recent. The call for projects for the 2050 update was halted in late 2019, and we will resume the call for projects this year in 2021. We're developing some updates that require a little more of our attention than we anticipated. Since I've come onto this project, I've focused on the project prioritization system and asked the staff to work with me on improving this. So we've already developed a system for prioritizing roadway projects, which we're going to present for review in February. And we've just begun looking at bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and the PE studies projects, which do not currently have a scoring methodology that we believe is very robust. So we're reviewing these scoring methodologies, and we're going to bring further proposals in this regard, both to the TAC, the CTAC, and to the policy committee. We're going to be requesting forecasted revenues from VDOT, the transit providers and localities in January. Adam, my colleague, has already begun work on this so that we can develop the funding envelope, how much money is going to be available during the 2050 window. Next slide. We're going to keep roughly the same chapter structure as the 2045 long-range transportation plan in our 2050 update, which has an overview of the region. It will deal with updated demographic and socioeconomic trends and projections. The scenario planning chapter, which is entitled Future Trends, we are doing some new modeling. We have a company called Cambridge Systematics, which is modeling the base year, the horizon year, and the no-build scenarios, and they deal particularly with the new projects that people are going to request. If you want a new roadway or a new intersection built, they're going to model for us the impacts of those new projects on the traffic and the roadway system and so on. And we've begun discussions with VDOT's modeling experts to model some alternative growth scenarios. And there we're asking questions like, what happens if more people move into the area than we're anticipating? Or what happens if we have more buses and trains in the area? How does that affect the future? Or what happens if we have more jobs in Fredericksburg? How does that affect the transportation system? We'll then look at the existing transportation system, what the regional needs are, and what our fiscally constrained plan will look like once we've got those funding updates. So, Mr. Chairman, that in a nutshell is what we're currently doing for our new long-range transportation plan for 2050. And we will bring you regular updates on progress on each one of these matters as the project unfolds. It's our major project for 2021.
Agree. Is there any questions and discussion on this? I have one, and I think some of the committee members might actually want to comment on this. So future trends, you know, in this world of doing rollovers of update from 2040 to 2045 to 2045, future trends kind of roll over and roll over and roll over as well. And I think that it seems to me that work from home initiatives and such efforts where fewer people in the future are going to be commuting possibly. This has all been accelerated tremendously this year because of COVID-19. And is that kind of new, hey, maybe we need to step back and take another look at future trends from a different perspective, because it ain't this ain't my grandfather's future trends, is what I guess what I'm trying to say. So.
Mr. Chair, I can just speak to that in the sense that the long-range transportation plan process did not initially intend redoing this chapter on future trends. But since I've come on board, I've asked that we redo this chapter because I think some of the underlying assumptions are a little bit out of date. And as you point out, things have changed recently. And we also have all these new transit infrastructure projects being put into the mix, which perhaps weren't anticipated some years back. So we're really asking for new modeling to be done. And we're looking at new scenarios that might unfold and trying to anticipate what that would look like in the future. So we have a base scenario, a set of base scenarios which looks at if everything goes the way we think it's going to go, this is what will happen. And Cambridge Systematics is doing that. And then we're looking at a series of alternative scenarios, which ask the question, what happens if that doesn't happen? What happens if something completely different happens? And of course, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't anticipate everything. But we're certainly doing more work than was initially planned on this whole future trends chapter to consider alternatives that might not have been considered in the previous 2045 update. So we really aren't just rolling this one over. We really are doing a proper job of rethinking this chapter.
That's excellent. Thank you for that new perspective and your leadership in that regard. I think that's excellent. Other comments, questions?
Is economic development brought into this sort of future forecasting?
So we don't specifically model future economic development, but we do look at jobs specifically. So the question for transportation planning is twofold. The one is, what does economic growth, greater economic growth, do to the transportation system? Or alternatively, what does less economic growth do to the transportation system? And then when we're doing the modeling, both Cambridge Systematics and Virginia Department of Transportation's modeling teams include in their projections jobs data. Where do we expect employment to happen and how much do we expect employment to grow? And those numbers get fed into the model. So the model predicts employment growth and then tries to model what the transportation system would look like with that amount of jobs growth and under the circumstances of that kind of economic growth. So it's a baked in assumption. We don't try to model economic factors separately from the transportation system. Assumptions are made about the expected economic growth in the region and in the country, and that's baked into how many cars, how many trains, how many buses, and all that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll go, Adam will provide a CMAQ prioritization methodology update for us. He's going to keep it brief as it's pretty technical. The TAC went over it significantly. And go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy New Year. I've got the next 4 agenda items here, so I will breeze through these and try and leave enough time for questions. I will get kind of right to the heart of what is going on with this update for our CMAQ and STBG scoring process. So we were asked by the policy committee in early or late FY20, basically to come up with a way to try and simply and objectively measure a project's benefits to the transportation management area, or TMA, that's in Northern Stafford County, which is responsible for generating some of the STBG funds that come to our region for allocation by the NPO. And so I'm going to skip ahead to basically what is the summary table, which gets kind of to the heart of what's going on here. So what we developed as a staff is essentially kind of a 2-tiered approach here, where we take the existing project types in our scoring methodology and we say, 1, is it feasible to actually measure a benefit to the TMA area for this project type? And if so, how do we want to do it? What's the measure going to be, and what's the threshold going to be, as well as the scoring sort of tables. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of leave it as brief as that in the interest of time, to see if there's any questions, and I can maybe reference other parts of the presentation.
This really just affects the Northern Stafford issues, right?
It doesn't. It technically affects any application. So this is to say that if there are 3 roadway projects, hypothetical, that come in a couple months when we do the next round of applications, one's in Stafford, one's in the city, one's in Spotsylvania, it will be rated differently, assuming this gets approved by the policy committee, than it would have been historically. So there could be, right, in theory, based on what we've built out, an additional benefit to the project that's in Stafford County, given its relative location to the TMA, as opposed to a project, say, in Spotsylvania County.
Okay, thanks. Any other discussion?
Adam, I was wondering, did you guys were told to come up with this methodology as part of this? Is this what you came up with? It turned out that it's not that feasible for changing. That's what I'm reading. Most of the slides I looked at.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I could only hear a couple words of that. It was relatively low volume there.
Yeah, it was broken up and it was weak and partially unreadable.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I had my Bluetooth was in the wrong spot. Adam, sorry, I'll rephrase. The methodology here, you guys were told to come up with this methodology, and turns out the methodology you came up with isn't that feasible for the bulk of these project types. Is that what I'm reading here? And then it's still up to the policy committee to decide if they want to move forward? Over.
I think that's generally safe to say. I think one thing that I might tend to correct with the first part of the question there is we were asked, right, to come up with a way to objectively measure a project's benefits to a geographical area, which is a pretty interesting exercise. So it's not based on the project's, technical merit per se. It's based on how does it affect an area. Well, the first questions we started asking ourselves were, are we talking about the people that live there, the people that travel through that place, the people that work there? So taking all of those things into consideration, that first step that we said is just essentially, is it feasible to come up with a simple, objective way of doing it? We didn't want it to be arbitrary. We didn't want it to be a solely political consideration. So that was part of the exercise that we went through with the subcommittee that was established to come up with this. So I think if I were to answer your question in a black and white way, yes, we did come back and say that essentially for the transit project types as well as intermodal freight, there's not a simple way that we came up with to measure a benefit to a geographical area, that they're region-wide benefits. Again, that's part of why, right, inherently these types of funding sources are allocated at the regional level and not the local level. So, but we were tasked with this exercise by, the policy committee back in June of 2020.
Right. So your recommendation moving forward with them is to adapt it, or you're basically saying, hey, look, we tried to look into this. There's no real difference. How we're doing now is great. So just keep it that way.
Oh, I see. So yeah, so let me speak to that for a second. So what we're proposing, right, is to amend the way that projects are currently scored. So for the project categories like roadway capacity, we say that yes, it is feasible to measure benefit to the TMA with that. So what we're doing, and this is part of why trying to keep it brief doesn't always work. But what we said we would essentially do, I'm just going to scroll to that type of project in particular here, is we said that we would take the original project score and condense that to what will become 90% of the project score. That final 10% is going to be that measure for what is the benefit to the TMA. So we have a mathematical calculation that's based on number of trips to and through that project. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. That would be the final 10% of that project's score.
Right, but it would only be. I apologize I'm laboring a point here, Chair. But give me just the last question. It would only be for these particular projects. Is that correct?
Right, for the project categories where we have assessed it to be feasible to actually measure a benefit. That's what we're proposing. So the policy committee could very well say, even if it's not simple, even if it's not extremely objective, let's just say, we would like you to come up with something for every project category. That's certainly on the table. And that was where we started with what we brought back as a staff to the subcommittee initially. And as we sort of refined it and got these types of questions, we said, really, it becomes a little bit arbitrary when you try and measure a transit project benefit to a geographical area. So those are certainly the types of questions that we thought through, but happy to talk about this a little bit more offline in the interest of time.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I believe if you would please caller identify yourself.
Yeah, it's Neil Holleran from Spot.
That's what I just wanted to have that for the record. Thank you.
Also, Adam, and wouldn't it be a good suggestion, because the TAC discussed this pretty extensively the last meeting, might be good to review that portion of the last TAC meeting which was recorded. Would that be helpful, you think, Adam?
As far as me going over that right now, or pointing folks where they can reference that?
No, like for Neil, if he wanted a little more in-depth discussion of what was discussed or insight into what was discussed, that might be helpful to review that meeting or that portion of that meeting, right?
Yep, we have that video on our website, and we would be happy to point out the timestamp for when that discussion took place.
Yeah, because it's technical, no doubt about it. All right, moving to performance-based planning and programming update.
So this too, Mr. Chair, I'll keep relatively brief. We do have a couple of requirements from the state that came down late in 2020 that we wanted to roll out and seek approval for from our committees this month. So there's 3 items in particular. We included the email from OIP, which is the state agency that's responsible for performance-based planning and programming for the state, just for everybody's reference in the packet. But there's essentially 3 items that we'd like to ask for the CTAC's endorsement on. The first is adding the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan to our TIP. So we included the relevant page from our TIP. This is kind of draft placeholder content for right now until it's approved, but we have some language here that again came from the state. They're asking us to adopt these performance targets for safety for FRED, which is a Tier 2 public transit agency. The second item is for highway safety target setting. So this is a template letter. Those of you that have been around a while see this at least once every year or two. This is something that, again, we are proposing to adopt the state's targets. And then also for bridge conditions. So this is another federal performance measure that we're required to track and have a target for within our region. Here too, we're proposing to support the state's target within the FAMPO region. So have they taken any questions? And we'd like this to be an action item for the committee.
I have a question. Did the TAC agree to these action items and support them?
They did unanimously.
Okay. The very first one is the adding public transit. Okay. And this is only for Fred. It does not, I mean, the other safety items are already addressed. So it's just adding Fred specific safety items.
That's correct. Right. Fred is the only public transit agency that operates in the Sanford region.
So I will say to the committee that we're going to take action on this, but we also do not have to take action on it. In other words, if it's a level of detail, I said, should injuries be 4 or 5 as far as under a fixed route? If the committee does not have a motion to approve this and it's not seconded, there's no real harm or foul from that, in that we're not making life or death decisions here as the advisory, the citizens advisory committee. The technical advisory committee would have a much greater insight in this. So anyway, so on this first item, is there a motion to approve, to agree with the TAC and approve what's been listed here as what we consider for the performance targets for Fred and be added to the tip, essentially?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
since we have no say so, and I trust them, I motion that we agree with what they have put out there for us.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second to?
Second.
I'll second. Okay. Is there any discussion? All right. Is there anybody who wants to abstain from this? Okay. Is there anybody opposed to the motion to accept what has been presented to us and adopted or recommended by TAC, as the motion is? Okay, I'm not hearing anybody opposed. So let's go active. Turn your mics on, and I'll ask for all those in favor in a minute here. Everybody go turn your mics on. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next. Okay, the next one, I'm getting lost here. Okay, in the highway safety target setting, can you go to the 2021 safety performance targets? Scroll down there. Keep going. Okay, those are all X's, and I don't know, we're approving something that has no value filled in. That's have a problem with that. What are you asking me to do here?
So, Mr. Chair, what I believe this is if an NPO wants to establish its own target for this performance measure, this is where you fill it in. But we indicate in the table above that we're going to adopt the statewide target.
Okay, so it's essentially NA, that paragraph, because above we have said, hey, we're gonna go with what's been recommended by the state.
Right.
Okay, so having that explained to me, it's a weird way to present it, I think. But anyway, having that explained to me, is there a motion to agree with the safety performance targets presented, where we agree to use the ones that are adopted by the state, and we're not going to provide our own different performance measures as shown in this chart here? Yes.
This is Al. I'll motion.
Thank you, Al. Al motions. Is there a second?
Dustin seconds.
Dustin seconds. Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion of this? Does everybody understand what we're doing here? That might be a better question. It's pretty straightforward. We're just going to adopt the statewide changes. All right. Is there anybody who wants to abstain from this? Okay. Is there anybody who does not agree, wants to vote against this adoption of the statewide annual goals. Okay, if you'll go hot mic, please. All those in favor of the motion to adopt the state recommended annual percentage changes as shown on this document? Say aye.
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 Thank you. Motion approved. All right. The third one is very similar. It's now bridge conditions target setting. And we get in this, it's almost the exact same thing. And Adam, correct me if I say this wrong, but we're supporting the state target. We're saying that we agree with the state adjusted targets, and we are not going to set any specific or new or different regional targets, just like in the previous motion. Did I say that right?
You have that right, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there anybody who wants to make a motion on that?
Mr. Chairman, Dave Swan, I'll make a motion. We accept it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I second, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that was Melvin. Thank you. Is there anybody who wants to abstain from supporting this motion? Or just abstain, I should say. Okay, is anybody opposed to supporting the motion of accepting the adjusted state targets and not developing or presenting our own, creating our own? Okay, not hearing anybody. Let's go hot mic. All those in favor of with the motion to support, to agree with the adjusted state targets as presented in this this letter in front of us, say aye.
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 Okay. All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, we're on to the tip updates again, you Adam, on the last three. I think that you're just going to talk about these last three, but we need a sentence or two. What is it? What are they?
Good question. So we've been working with our colleagues at the Fredericksburg Regional Transit to basically work with them to ensure that the projects that they are predicting are going to receive federal funding within the next 4-year window are in our tip. So if there's any federal funding that comes into the region for transportation projects, it has to be in our tip. So we're working with them right now to ensure that the DRPT, so Department of Rail and Public Transportation, that their 6-year plan has this information in it. And once it does, we will be able to add this to our tip. So we were, I think, preparing to include this in the agenda for next month. So Mr. Chair, happy to take any questions you might have that might be more specific on this item as well.
The question to me is, I mean, other than the title, what are the three things specifically that the project or that need to be included in a tip? I mean, I don't think anybody has a problem with including them in a tip, but it'd just be nice to know, what are we including?
Sure, I can describe, kind of briefly what each of the three projects are. The first one, so FRT 0015, the Transit Strategic Plan. So Fred has received guidance from DRPT that a transit agency now of their size should be fulfilling that obligation, the Transit Strategic Plan. In the past, I don't believe Fred has been required to do that, so that's part of why they're proposing to add this project. I think purchase and replace radio equipment is relatively self-explanatory. And then the parking ride and parking lot purchase, I believe, I'm 99% sure that that is for the lot adjacent to the Fred hub in the city of Fredericksburg on Route 1, right there by, is it Umi, the Japanese restaurant there? There's that sort of lot that's behind that restaurant that they're proposing to purchase and treat as a parking ride lot.
Yeah, that is correct. That is the lot that's being referred to.
So you're just telling us that projects like this now need to be included in the tip, and that's what we're doing. So.
Right, and this is not for action this month. This is just an update to make the committee aware.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Any questions or discussion on that? Okay. The next is an action item.
Yep, the final thing for me tonight, Mr. Chair, is seeking the committee's endorsement of a resolution to support the regional I-395 and 95 commuter choice applications. So we've been working with our planning partners in the region as they develop their applications for this, which I believe are due at the end of this month on January 29th. We've been working with them on sort of data collection, ensuring consistency with our plans, that sort of thing. And they have requested that we submit a letter from Fanto supporting their applications.
Okay, so two questions. One is refresh for us the commuter choice, the funds that have been developed because of the hot lanes and I-395, I-95, right?
Sure. I'll say as a caveat, I'm not the foremost expert on this program. It's relatively new to me, but it's a 2-year cycle program like Smart Scale, and it's basically NZTC. So we're going to need to update this acronym here. My apologies. The Northern Virginia Transportation Commission puts this on. They basically get about a $30 million pot of funding to allocate to projects based on merit that they get as part of the toll revenue, right, from the I-395 corridor. So part of what a project has to demonstrate in order to be eligible to receive this funding pot is it is going to take single occupant vehicle traffic off of the I-395 corridor. So there's lots of different technical ways that projects do that. So from our perspective, anything that we can do to, in this region, relieve congestion, we are obviously supportive of any such efforts. So that is why we're seeking approval for this resolution.
And that's good, because the idea of taking the cars off of I-395 and I-95 is specifically for us is the purpose of this. So, is there any other questions on what this application is before we move forward? And again, this was the TAC went through this and approved or agreed to it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Rob Gates. I'll move that we go along with this.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Dave Swan will second it.
Thanks, Dave. Is there anyone who wants to abstain? Okay, I'm sorry, I should have asked, is there any other discussion of the motion before us?
Mr. Chair, Dave, I think in the nutshell, this is congestion management. This is the policy committee's commitment to congestion management, which we've heard about over the last, 2 years?
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, any other discussion? All right. Is anybody opposed to this this letter of agreement to ask for to support the following the 3 projects listed? Actually, the 2 sub projects as well, 6 projects, 5 projects.
And Mr. Chair, Dave Swan, just one question. In view of the future trends in the area based on working at home and changes going on in both the Commonwealth and locally, are we looking at any changes? Is there a change in the overall congestion management plan? In other words, are we still facing a great deal of congestion? Is anybody studying that hard with any data, or where are we with that? Just as an aside, it came to my mind as we're working on this.
Well, if you go back to the previous discussion and the presentation by Mr. Hollis, yes, I mean, he said we need to look at things a little bit, our assumptions about what the future is going to bring in a little different light. New prism. So there may be some adjustments to what is the demand for this But this essentially would be in line with it anyway, because it's any way what we can do to take, I shouldn't say that. It is somewhat aligned to it in that we're trying to get off of the interstate.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, but I'm still seeing the same things, the same partnering and actions that we've seen for the last couple of years. So I'm hoping that the policy committee is thinking about the impacts that will certainly be coming, because I see companies moving to a lot of work at home and telecommuting.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just make one very brief comment. The Virginia Department of Transportation made a presentation at the MPO's quarterly meeting recently, where they're monitoring the traffic and they're giving us a month-by-month update on what's happening with the traffic. And I have to tell you that while the car ridership is somewhat down from a year ago, it's only a small percentage down on the I-95 and routes like this in Virginia. And the freight trucks are actually higher than they were a year ago in spite of COVID. So in fact, the traffic is still getting worse. In spite of people working at home right now in large numbers, the traffic is actually still getting worse. So when the COVID vaccination program has run its course, I'm guessing that we're going to see increased traffic in spite of the fact that a number of people are working from home and continue to work from home. We've got the numbers already on the current traffic, and while the car traffic is a little down, the freight traffic that has increased has more than made up for that. So the total traffic picture is still quite concerning. It's likely to get worse after the COVID pandemic has run its course.
Thank you for that. That agrees with what I've been seeing as well.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make an observation, personal observation, really. But I find it interesting that a year ago, when I first came on this committee, exactly a year ago, we were discussing giving up parking spaces at the commuter lots, if you remember at that point. So here we are a year later, and it seems like we're making up for that, maybe.
Those remember were some very specific ones that FAMPO specifically is leasing, and it was an adjustment based on the usage where they had leased, say, 30 spots or something, and past performance had shown they really only needed 15. So it's really cutting back on how much was GW Ride Connect was paying to lease those. A little bit different. There still have been the initiatives to add park and ride up and down the corridor. I mean, those initiatives went in for Smart Scale, for example. So I think two different things. I think the demand for additional park and ride is certainly there and well demonstrated just by being committed. So I think that's two different things, Al. Okay, we've had a motion and a second. I'll call for and no one has opposed it. I'll say that again. No one has opposed it. If you do oppose this, I'll say it again. Anybody opposed to the motion? Please speak up. All right. All those let's go hot mics. All those in support of the motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you. Let's see. Okay, we're down to okay, we got through the action items. All right, we're down to the meeting calendar. This meeting is a long one. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So members of CTAC, on screen is the draft meeting schedule for the 2021 calendar year. Highlighted dates in green indicate that CTAC meets monthly every second Wednesday at 6 p.m., except for in August and December when FAMPO committees do not meet at all. Juneteenth was added on June 18th as a holiday this year, and at last week's meeting, the Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, accounted for holidays and ended up rescheduling meetings for July, September, and November this year, doubling weekly meetings with CTAC in some months. So with that in mind, you might want to consider finalizing CTAC dates and changing some for staff planning purposes. Moving meetings forward or back in months where TAC and CTAC meet the same week, except for November, would be helpful. And those months are April, June, and July. FAMPO staff recommends moving April and July meetings up a week and June back 1 week to spread committee meetings out for those months. While a vote is not required, meeting changes should be decided and confirmed, preferably tonight. And the next CTAC meeting will be February 10th at 6 p.m. And I am happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Go ahead.
I see November the 10th. And November 10th is normally the Marine Corps birthday. And I'm not a former, I'm a United States Marine. And during that time frame, we normally do something throughout that whole time frame. And I think it's that this year here, I didn't make the meeting because of November the 10th, because of the Marine Corps birthday.
Well, we have
Can we push it a week back, Mr. Chair?
Veterans Day is observed on the 11th. So that is
I
a holiday.
I understand Veterans Day, but Marine Corps birthday is November 10th. And that weekend through that week, Marines, we normally do something that whole week, and we have certain celebrations throughout that whole week.
Okay.
Hoorah! I understand. Hoorah! I understand Veterans Day. Veterans Day is a holiday. Marine Corps birthday is not a holiday. It's just a day set aside, November 10th, 1775, when Marine Corps was first established, and that's why we have been. That's why, like I said, that's why I didn't when in the meeting this past year, November 10th, because of the Marine Corps birthday, because we do certain things that whole week. If everyone wants to go for it, then that's fine. But that's one day I know I won't be able to meet because I'm dedicated to Marine Corps birthday.
Okay, so the issue from FAMPO's perspective is that having the TAC and the CTAC in the same week is it's too much meetings in 1 week for them to handle. Is that the basic issue, Leah?
Yes, but for November we said November we said to just leave it, because if you move it up, then you're going to be after policy committee meeting meets. I mean, you could technically to the 17th if you'd like. If you move it up, then there will be 2 evening meetings that first week of November. It would be CTAC on Wednesday and BPAC on Thursday.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody have a problem moving on the 17th?
Yeah, that the basic issue for as an advisory committee to the policy committee, it's kind of makes us a little bit irrelevant in some cases when we are discussing things that the policy committee has already approved, and we've seen that in the past. So it's a strong position of CTAC that we meet, and the TAC obviously, that we meet prior to the policy committee. Otherwise, we become a little less. It just doesn't make a lot of sense because the final decision is going to be made by the policy committee. So it would be most important for us, or the best course of action would be that we are there. We have discussed the issue, and the transportation advisory, the Citizen Transformation Advisory Committee can say, yes, we agree with this, or we oppose whatever is going to be taken on by the policy committee. Doesn't happen that often, but that's the going in position. So Yeah, I would, let's start with April. All right, we'll hold that thought. April is one where FAMPO is asking us right now to move our meeting on the 14th of April forward a week. And that's right, Leah, that's what you're suggesting,
Yes,
isn't it? Okay.
to the 7th, yes.
So the only downside to that is we don't have the advantage of the TAC meeting, but that's not as critical. Is there any objection? Let's start with them. Let's go through an order on the April meeting to move it forward to the 7th. There's something on the 7th though.
Oh, that's just to get some tip amendments in. So that is a meeting. Yeah, it's just a deadline.
So you're asking us to move for the 14th. So does anybody got any problem with that? Okay.
That works.
Okay, thanks. It looks like, and then the same issue in June, correct?
Yes. Well,
Hey,
June, we requested that you move it back to the 16th.
oh, perfect. Yep. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. Okay, yeah. Nobody should have any objection to that because it allows us to stay after the TAC, which is helpful, at least for me as a chairman, to hear what the TAC has to say before we meet, and then have our meeting and our discussion before. Okay. Is there any? So that would move to from June 9th to June 16th. Is there any issues, problems, concerns with that? Okay. July, we have 2 meetings in the same week too. And what's the proposal?
That one can be moved up to the 7th.
Okay. Similar to April, is there any objections or concerns with moving the meeting from the 14th of July to the 7th of July? Okay, I can't. Now we'll get to, that's the only, okay, the next one is November. So we can't move it forward. It's problematic to the 10th, talking about the 10th of November. We can't because of other conflicting meetings are already in the preceding week. We can't move it forward. Moving it to after the policy committee, I think is problematic. And the conflict is that some people will be engaged with celebrations of the Marine Corps birthday.
Hey, Dave, Dave Swan. The 10th is the Marine Corps birthday, but at least in the last 30 years, it's been another work day for Marines. And we celebrate at the end of working hours. Now, in the area, there are Marine Corps birthday events the week before, the week during, in some cases, the week after. So in order to just accommodate Marine Corps birthday doesn't seem, from my view, and I'm a retired Marine, I hate to disagree with Milt, but I don't think it's worth changing the date. And traditionally, we precede the policy committee, which everybody's more comfortable with. So just from my view, I don't think it's worthwhile to change that day, because that day is another working day for all of us.
Are there any other Marines who want to weigh in? Okay, so I don't, we don't have to vote on it, but as the chair, I'm going to say we don't move that meeting.
And that was FAMPO staff's recommendation to leave it.
I'll also say June 9th, there'll be a new chairman, so you'll be rid of me and he could change the decision. But anyway. So we're not going to move November, and we'll move the others as requested and recommended by FAMPO.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Leah. Second round of public comment, Stacy.
Yeah, we do not have any written comments to read. We did have a few people watching, I think 3 now. They're still tuned in watching us live 2 hours and 13 minutes later. So thank you to everyone watching us live. And you can ask if there's anyone on the line, but I don't think there is.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public who wants to make a comment at this time? All right, thank you. We've got some correspondence.
Yeah, so I won't review these in the sake of time, just 3 different news articles. You might have seen these. If you catch up with the news frequently, just one on development bringing more traffic to Stafford. The 8B is on the VDOT public hearing that I mentioned, so you can read that for more information on those Route 3 improvements. And then the last article is a mention on FAMPO about passenger rail improvements, as Ian mentioned tonight.
Staff reports.
Yeah, so the major thing here is there is a link on this agenda. It's the text in blue that's underlined in blue. And when you open that up, it'll take you to a manual that's designed for CTAC members as well as members of the general public. It's basically transportation planning in our region in a nutshell. All kinds of resources in here. There's an acronym section in the very back that might be helpful to keep on hand when you are attending meetings. We have gotten feedback from a couple CTAC members of some changes and edits we need to make to this. So I will make those edits later this week and email everyone a updated copy, but they aren't huge major edits. So if you've already printed this off, I'll let you know what we change and you can just pencil that in. The last thing.
Dave Swan.
Yes.
Assistant Dave Swan, I'd like to say a great job on that. Thank you, FAMPO staff, for producing it.
Thank you. We hope it's useful. And then the very last thing is at our next meeting, we have a guest speaker. We'll be sure to trim the agenda next time accordingly. I don't think she's going to be speaking too long though, but it'll be great to hear from Tamara Banks. She is a travel trainer with Fred. Basically, her job is funded by a grant, and she encourages Fred ridership by reaching out to people and actually showing them in person how to use the Fred, bus app. So she's going to be speaking to us about that service and also giving us some insights onto rider experience and challenges.
Under staff reports, I mean, we have our new administrator with us. Is there anything that you would like to provide, Mr. Allison?
Thanks, Chair. I know I'm conscious of the time, and we have had a very long meeting tonight. We just have made 2 staff changes that you might be interested in. Because our 2 interns are still at university and we're working remotely from outside of our region, I've not renewed their contracts for 2021. However, we have appointed a full-time staff member, Matthew Lahane, who was a part-time temporary staff member on a contract, has graduated with his master's degree, and after a round of interviews with various other candidates, we've decided to offer Matthew the position which he's taken up from the 1st of January. So we now have a new full-time staff member, and he's particularly going to be tasked with dealing with transit-related matters, transportation demand management-related matters, and the modeling that we're doing that was spoken about earlier of highways and ridership and all that kind of thing. So we're excited to have a new full-time staff member, and we've done away with a lot of the temporary part-time intern type positions which we had in the past. So that's a big change for us, and we welcome Matthew to the team.
Yeah, it's great to have Matthew stay on board. That's great. One thing I thought of was there's tomorrow morning there is it deals with the state legislators meeting to discuss transportation issues at 9 a.m. I don't have the specific dial-in information, whatever, but maybe we can send that out for anybody who wants to dial into that Zoom meeting tomorrow morning to talk with a subcommittee, I guess, of transportation committee or have the legislature, state legislature will be discussing transportation. So if anybody's interested in that.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
is it possible you can get us that information before the meeting starts?
Yeah. Well, we'll put it out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see, member reports. Do we have anybody from Fredericksburg who needs to say anything that's urgent to get out to the committee? Okay. Is anybody from Stafford?
Negative, Dave.
Hey, anybody from Spotsy?
Dave, I just want to mention, in terms of that meeting tomorrow, there is one piece of legislation that directly would affect this area and this body, which is Josh Cole's. Go get Josh Cole's legislation for a proposal to form a regional board here, regional transportation board.
You mean like a transportation authority like they have in Richmond?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is one quick note on that. It's not a mandating legislation, so it's not something that means something would be created by the legislation. It would just give the authority to localities that would so choose.
Right. And that's not universally accepted within the community, so you're right. Okay, any member reports from Caroline County? Any from King George?
No.
All right. Thank you. And let's see, well, okay, let me just finally say thank you, everyone. It's a long, when you're off for a couple of months because of the holidays or whatever, it kind of builds up and there's a bow wave. So thank you for your patience and thank you for great inputs on our discussions tonight, and look forward to our next meeting. So I will I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Dave Swan, a motion to adjourn.
Anybody second?
Second.
Anybody not want to adjourn? All in favor of adjourning? Say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.